All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Liam McCullum Show. Today I have Danny Long on again. For people who haven't listened to my previous episode with her, it's one of my most listened to that is outside of my Scott Horton interviews. So that's a huge feat for Danny. Congrats, Danny, for getting all those listeners. We also got some press on it. I think a few journalists reached out and they were sharing it around. So yeah, this is a really big story, and for anyone who hasn't listened to my previous podcast with her, I'll link to that. And then please go watch that before you watch this one. And today we're just going to have Danny give an update. I had her on last time to talk about her husband. Her husband is in the military, and the Pentagon has had a vaccine mandate. Um, and she told her story and what they were going through last time. And I just wanted to bring her on and have her tell an update as to what's going on. So welcome, Danny. Thanks for coming on again. And do you want to just maybe summarize what happened last time, what we talked about last time, and then give an update as to where we are now?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, I always start by saying my views and opinions are my own. I do not represent the Air Force or the DoD in any capacity. This is our personal experience and what we are going through, and views and opinions are my own. So, last time you had me on was November, and that was about 3 months after the mandate, the COVID-19 mandate kicked off. My husband was routing a religious accommodation against the COVID-19 vaccine. And when we spoke, he had his initial accommodation denied and he was putting in an appeal. And so he put in his appeal, and that came back the end of December, also denied, blanket generic language. Clearly, nobody looked at his package or read his package or anything like that. Um, Also in December, they came out with a policy where they said he was a danger to the force and he could not be doing any training any longer, even if it was online. He could not have college tuition. He's working on a degree in cybersecurity. He could not have college tuition. It was considered formal training, no formal training. So they pulled him from a lot of courses he needed to be eligible for promotion. And the Air Force regulations say that when you are routing a religious accommodation, you are not to be held back from opportunities in any capacity. So they were violating their own regulations and pulling him off of training that he needed and not allowing him to attend college courses. Some of the training he could have gone to was virtual and online learning, distance learning. And he said, well, why aren't you letting me go to online learning classes, but you're having me instruct in person? Because he is a survival specialist and he was still taking pilots and aircrew out in the field and training them in person. So as soon as he said that, this doesn't make sense. This isn't adding up. What's going on? Like, why can't I take college classes, but you're still having me train in person? It's like he was only a threat to the force when it was convenient for them. And anyway, so he routed a complaint, and within days of that complaint, they pulled him from his job and they took his leadership position away from him. They basically shoved him in a broom closet, and that's where he's been since, just shuffling around. And we're a couple weeks away from this being 1 year since they enacted the mandate. So it's just, we're still here. And um, he got his appeal denial, and they said you have 5 days to get the shot, or you can volunteer to separate. Well, he can't volunteer to separate because he's in a critically manned career field. They're very low in numbers. And so if he routed a request to volunteer to separate, they would deny it and say, we cannot let you go because of Manning. And then they're going to proceed to kick him out. So they won't let him go, but they'll kick him out. So he received his first bad paperwork in his 18-year career. He got an LOR, letter of reprimand. He appealed that. They went on with issuing it. He's been given another letter of reprimand. They had him signed up for separation classes. They refused to give him separation paperwork. They wanted him to take classes. And so he's been signed up for separation classes. And just 2 weeks ago, there was a federal injunction in one of the Air Force cases that halted all punitive punishment and discharges. So currently, he is in a holding pattern while this court case is being litigated.
Okay, yeah. So last time we talked, this was the episode came out November 12th, 2021.
Hmm.
And at this point, I think you were in the appeals process. So you
Yeah.
mentioned a few things, a couple things that happened in December. He was stripped of all of his titles. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Hmm. Yeah. So he was, that was the beginning of January. He is the squad boss, if you will, of about a 6-man crew. And he's the boss. And they basically said, you're going to be removed. So we need to hand your shop over to somebody who is not going to be getting letters of reprimand. So his shop went over to a vaccinated member, and um, yeah, and he was just moved from his crew, and that's been really hard from him because they're a very tight knit community. And the worst thing you can do to somebody who's going through a lot mentally is to isolate them. And that's exactly what's happened. He's in a broom closet, basically. It's not really a broom closet, but it's this little office. The other interesting thing that has happened is he actually is in this office with a few pilots, and he shares this office with them. It's smaller space. They don't have to, no one has to wear a mask anymore. And it's okay if he sits in the office next to these people all day, but the second they would go to the woods to do training, all of a sudden COVID's a threat again, and my husband can't go do training with them. So it's just, there's like nonsensical policy after nonsensical policy. And I think that's just what's been so frustrating about the whole process, is none of it makes sense.
Yeah. So if he was put in this broom closet, as you say, what are
Mhm.
his duties? Like if he was stripped
Nothing.
of, so what is he
Nothing.
doing day to day?
Nothing. He's literally wasting taxpayer dollars at this point. He finds little things to do. There's a couple like things he's worked on, some personal recovery plans, stuff like that, PR planning. But day to day, there's not a lot happening. And it's like they forgot about him. And it's really been interesting, I think. And a lot of people are like, oh, use this time to work on your degree. And he's like, I can't even do that. I can't even have college tuition or tuition assistance. So nothing about this makes sense. And I think that's what I kept saying earlier when I talked to you the first time, is nothing about this makes sense. Like, the policies do not match the situation. And just the other day, we saw the CDC come out with new guidelines, and the military has had so many opportunities to off ramp and take an exit. They have 28 lawsuits against them right now, and they keep losing. Injunctions are happening. The Navy has an injunction. Air Force has an injunction. It's very likely the Marines will be getting an injunction this week. The Coast Guards are lined up. Like, it is just one domino after another. You'd think they'd take a pause and reevaluate, but they are just on the gas, full steam ahead.
Yeah, just talking about all of those contradictions and how nothing really makes sense. Last time you told a few stories, like for instance, someone who I think was on maternity leave or
Hmm.
they were about to leave, and I think they were about to leave the military entirely.
Yes.
Do you want to rehash that story just really quick so people can kind of see the absurdities that are going on?
Yeah, it's just one of hundreds. I mean, people don't even believe it when I sit and tell them. The one I shared last time was the woman was on maternity leave when the mandate dropped, and she was planning on separating from the service after her 12 weeks maternity leave. This is very common for female service members to take their 12 weeks maternity leave, and upon completion of that, they go ahead and start their terminal leave, which is any leave they have saved up over their career, and then they transition out of the military. So she was being harassed and called in her home during her maternity leave to get this shot or show proof of this vaccination. And she was just like, why? This doesn't make sense. I'm getting out. But basically, what has happened is a commander has a roll call of people in his squadron or who he's in charge of. And it shows, who's vaccinated and who's not. And it's almost like it's a competition to see who has a 100% vaccination rate. And they don't take into account situations like this woman who was on maternity leave. All they know is that they're not at 100% and they want to be promoted. And it doesn't reflect well on them if they don't have 100% compliance. So it's just been a heavy-handed mandate that has just been nonsensical. And when I talked to you last, I was very frustrated because things like that just did not make sense. People who have had religious accommodations for shots in the past, my husband had medical or exemptions in the past. Those people were not even being considered for this exemption. And I was just like, this doesn't make sense. This is so frustrating. Nothing's adding up. Well, I think maybe 2 months after I spoke with you, we discovered that the DoD is actually conducting a study on mRNA technology. And they are doing active surveillance on military members, civilian members, including family members. So that means if you are in the military health system and you received an mRNA vaccine, you are being monitored and actively having your data collected right now on experimental medicine and mRNA technology. They are studying the effects of mRNA technology on myocarditis and pericarditis. And so in this study, I wrote down the study number. It is study C4591011. And as soon as I found out about that study, it's like the clouds parted. I was like, okay, this makes sense. Like, finally, I have an answer why none of this has made sense. And there's just been this on the gas push. And then when I discovered that, I was like, there it is. Like, that is what is going on here. So now, because of that, I've kind of been able to have like a comical outlook on it, where it's not funny, but it's also funny. The push is nothing to do with COVID and it's nothing to do with health.
Yeah, that kind of brings up another question I was going to ask about just how you guys are doing, and also I guess relating to spouses and the families of military members. Like, how have things been for you? Because I know last time you summarized a little bit about how the military was treating spouses. Or has that changed at all?
Um, it Yes, the winter of severe illness and death was a little bit dodgy for a minute because they were still saying spouses can't attend these events. There have been spouses locked out of retirement ceremonies, graduations, things like that because of their vaccination status. That has personally not affected me too much, again, because we are in Florida and Florida has been pretty open this entire time. And I think the commanders on our base would have a very hard time imposing some heavy-handed rules onto spouses when you can go off base and there's no restrictions whatsoever anywhere, you know? So I don't think our base was willing to kind of go that route, which I'm thankful for, but there's definitely been some things that have been happening that has just been really sad. Hawaii, for example, they threw a Christmas party for the children because they leaked jet fuel into their water supply. And so families were displaced in a hotel. And so they said, we're going to do a Christmas party for the kids. And people were very excited, got down there, and lo and behold, there was a mandate. So if those spouses did not have a COVID-19 vaccine card, they were not allowed to attend the Christmas party and their children were turned away. So that's, stuff like that happened over the winter. It is obviously loosened up now that, restrictions everywhere have loosened up, but it's just something I've never seen before, and I hope I never see it again.
And to talk about your husband, you said that he's kind of isolated right now, and that's tough for
Mm,
him because he is
yeah.
with his group. Does he have anyone that is around him that agrees with him and that is supportive? Is there like a movement within the military right now that are resisting the mandates that he can kind of look to?
There's such a big movement. I'm so proud of everybody. I don't even want to, oh, I could just cry. I'm so proud of us. The government has been running counterinsurgency operations for 20 years, and lo and behold, all these people are using those exact same tactics that they learned over the last 20 years to network together. Our groups are just so encouraging. Um, we have so many people holding the line, and the DoD is not wanting to be forthcoming on the actual numbers, but they are astronomical. And he does have people in his work center who are holding the line. The number is not as high as it originally was. He does have people who encourage him, and literally everybody is rooting for him. Leadership on down, everybody is rooting for him. But the problem is nobody up on top wants to put a target on their back. Nobody wants to stand up and say this is wrong. And the people who did stand up and say this is wrong, they're no longer in charge anymore. You have to shut up to get along, kind of thing. And my husband has his tagline has been cowards all, like, this whole time. He's like, so and so's a nice guy, but he's a coward, because people aren't willing to take the stand that they need to take. And they don't really know what to do with him at this point, because all along he said, this is illegal. What you're doing is illegal, because it is. And we can get into that a little bit with the EUA shot versus FDA approved. Anthrax happened not that long ago, only 20 years ago, when they were experimenting on troops with the anthrax shot. And they were taken to court, and the court decided that they cannot use troops as experiments, and they have to consent to emergency use products. To this day, we do not have FDA approved products available on military installations. So what they're doing is wrong on many levels. It's illegal on that level, and it's also illegal because they're violating RFRA, which is the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act. And so he's been telling people all along, this is illegal, this is wrong, showing them documentation, showing them laws in black and white. And he comes home and he's like, am I the only one who knows how to read? You know, this is very clear, this is very evident. And when the federal injunction happened, people were surprised. And I don't know how people are surprised, because every step of the way he has presented evidence to them, to the JEGs on base. JEG is the military lawyers, essentially, and they have shut him down. So, and some JEGs have even gone on to say that the law is irrelevant in this situation. So that's kind of where we are at. We are dealing with the cancer within the military of people who are turning a blind eye to the law because they're trying to push an agenda through.
So you mentioned the anthrax case, and
Mhm.
I think we can kind of tie that to this study that you mentioned. So is that study that you mentioned earlier in the podcast, it's being done by the DoD?
Yes,
So
the DoD.
do you foresee something like that happening again where, I mean, if it is illegal to experiment on troops, do you foresee that coming up again?
Well, we're doing Anthrax 2.0 right now. It's happening as we speak. They are giving emergency use products, experimental products, to troops and their family members without proper informed consent, and monitoring them and monitoring the rates of myocarditis and pericarditis. And it's like the law only works if you hold people accountable to it. Like, the law is there, but then you have to be willing to stand and fight all the way to make sure that it is followed. So we are living through Anthrax 2.0, in my opinion. Will it be righted in the future? That remains to be seen, because we have seen a lot of lawlessness um, during this administration. So it, if we have good judges who do their jobs and apply the law as they should, then um, maybe we will see some movement. But the problem is it's never going to be righted. It will never be put back together. It's like when you break a glass jar, it's shattered and you can't put it back together. It's never going to be the same. And, people in my husband's leadership told him, well, if this mandate goes away, we can take your LORs back. It won't be a big deal. We'll just pretend they didn't happen. And he's like, but I didn't get promoted last year because I wasn't allowed to attend these trainings. You have sent me and my family to mental health counseling because of the stress you have put us under. And he has lost all trust, all faith in the institution that he faithfully served for I guess 18 years. So it's never going to be right. Even if legally at the end of the day his stance is validated and there's vindication, it's never going to be put right again. And last year when I talked to you and we were kind of at the beginning of this, everybody was fighting so hard because they wanted to stay in. They wanted to stay in. They wanted to keep serving. They wanted to finish their careers. They loved their country. And there was this fight to fight for their careers. And now nobody wants to stay in. Like, nobody. We have people who are opting out of the injunction and they're pulling their religious accommodation and they're wanting to be kicked out. We have people who are just hoping that they can get to the end of their service commitment and separate with their benefits intact. We have people who are not reenlisting. People are getting out in droves over the shot mandate. And my husband was sent to TAPS course, which is a transition assistance program. And there were 30 people in his class, and they run these classes every week. Everybody was getting out over this mandate, even if they got the shot, even if, they could move forward in their career, they have no desire to. So we went from everyone wanting to stay in, fighting to stay in, to everybody just wanting to get out with benefits that are due them and parting ways. It's been an ugly, nasty divorce, and everybody is just done.
Yeah, that brings up something that I was going to ask you about. So as people who listen to my podcast probably know, I'm a libertarian. I am a non-interventionist when it comes to foreign policy, but I do believe in strong defense. So I believe we should have people here defending our country, but I'm not in favor of a lot of the offensive wars that we've been going on. And uh, regardless of whatever everyone else thinks about that, they you can disagree with me on that. What is currently very naive of the administration is we are at, I think, historically low enlistment, and they're continuing to kick people out of the military, or people are continuing to leave the military because of this mandate. And then a lot of the propaganda videos that they're sending out there are appealing to LGBT people. Like a lot of the military ads are pride videos. And I just think there's not very much appeal right now. And at the same time, the Biden administration is ramping up tensions with both China and Russia and Iran and Afghanistan again. So do you and your husband have any concerns about this? Is there any worry in the military that our administration is just running into a conflict that we might not have the manpower to actually stand up against, whether we should or shouldn't? It's just a question of, could we?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts, and I'm trying to think of how to, like, delicately, like, word it.
Mhm.
Our leadership is completely tone deaf. They are completely out of touch. My husband is tired of being told he's a racist, sexist, whatever. They do all these trainings all day long on, pronouns in your email, stuff like that. And it's there's been very little time actually working on perfecting their skills and getting ready for whatever is coming next. We are throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars in sign-on bonuses at kids. I think the Navy's offering $115,000 in sign-on bonuses to people. The Army was dropping the GED requirement. They are desperate to pull people in. And I have great concerns about kicking out anybody who is willing to stand up and say, what you're doing is actually illegal, and I'm not going to go along with it. Well, at the same time, preying upon people who might be, undereducated, don't have a GED, and throwing gobs of cash at them. At that point, you are just hiring paid mercenaries for your military. Um, I don't foresee this ending well, and I really wish civilians and people outside the military would understand what's happening a little bit better. They are essentially purging anybody who will critically think, anybody who will apply the law, and, they take an oath to serve the Constitution. The First Amendment of the Constitution is the right to religious liberty. And you have all these older people, or maybe some old salty veterans, saying, oh, you got every other shot. There's no religion against vaccines, blah, blah, blah. But what they don't understand is your religious conviction can be that you are convicted that the DOD is doing something illegal and you're not going to take part in it. That can be something that you route an accommodation against. So this is definitely, it's been referred to as a purge, and that's exactly what is happening. They do not want independent thinkers, they do not want critical thinkers, and they definitely do not want people who will stand up and say, what you're doing is illegal and I will not participate in it. So there's some major concerns there. And the other thing, when you talk about being a libertarian, it's kind of interesting because when we went into war with, the early 2000s into Iraq and Afghanistan, a bulk of the people who are holding the line were fresh out of high school. A lot of people holding this line are right around 20 years. Um, they were patriotic. They were angry about 9/11. And they went into this and they served their country and they believed in what they were doing. And then we're watching things happen, and we're watching things happen within the DoD. And then we're watching how Afghanistan went down last year, a year ago. And we're watching Ukraine, and we're watching, people who have invested interest in stocks that they didn't divest run the military. And we're starting to like connect the dots a little bit of, oh, this was probably all going on 20 years ago. So there's been like a deconstruction happening of everything that a lot of these people joined the military, what they believed, how they served, everything that they believed in is just kind of unraveled this last year. Starting with Afghanistan, followed by this mandate. So we are talking about moral injuries, PTSD, just adding up because these people are having to deconstruct their entire belief system and really reevaluate the country that they're serving and how they're serving. And that is why people are leaving in droves, in my personal opinion. They are leaving in droves because they do not want to go to some proxy war over in Ukraine.
Yeah, I grew up in a very conservative home and had a lot of reverence for the military and a lot of respect for the culture. I just know a lot of veterans, and there's something to this idea that I've learned that like you can kind of still keep your identity and also acknowledge that the way that the politicians have been abusing our veterans,
Mhm.
and abusing our the people in the military, it's very obvious. And I so I have this book right here, Enough Already by
Mhm.
Scott
Mhm.
Horton. Anyone who hasn't read it should, or listen to the audiobook on Audible. And I've been to a few of these events with him, and Scott is he's like he calls himself a skater kid. Like he wasn't in the
Mhm.
military or anything. But when you go to these events, there are veterans in the crowd. I've been to a couple of these, and the veterans end up coming up and talking to him after, and they all agree. And I think the scariest part about what's happening is that they're getting rid of people who critically think, who have critical thinking skills. So they will be able to, or they will take orders at home to enforce tyranny at
Mhm.
home, but also that we're just weakening any power that we might have abroad. And I think that there our officials are still living in a time where they think that we can beat like global powers. And I just don't think that that's the case. I
Mhm.
don't think that we have the military might right now to take on Russia or China, let alone nuclear strikes. So
Mhm.
yeah,
And
it
morale is so down, like I've never seen morale this low. Afghanistan was a huge blow to people last year. And there are people who are you thought that they would do 25 years or 30 years, and even those people are just done. They're just hitting the button and getting out because they don't have any trust in the institution anymore. And it's for I know my husband has done 7 deployments, and he has missed all kids' birthdays, holidays, all the things. And I speak for many other spouses when I say we felt like the sacrifice he was making at the time was worth it. Like, we felt like it was worth it. And spouses do not feel that way anymore. They do not feel like their husband missing out on their lives is worth it anymore. And they are telling them, I'm done. And so people are getting out because if you don't have your family and your spouse behind you, it's impossible to keep serving. So people are getting out in droves, and that it's going to take years to build our strength back up after this. And the fact that they have not off ramped this mandate just really concerns me. Like, is that the entire plan?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I worry about that.
Well,
Is that the whole point?
and that's kind of the picture that I just wanted to paint, is that imagine them naively trying to get into conflict with Russia and China now, and what could come of that, regardless of whether you think we should get involved with Russia and China. Even if you do believe we should, um, what could come of that if we don't have the strong military that we used to? I don't think we should get involved, but even if I did, I would be advocating against these policies because we just do not have the strength, and I worry of what war could look like at home, and the tyranny that could look like that we could have at home, um, because people are leaving in droves. But I do want to move on to the whistleblower thing, that you sent me. There was a big document that you sent me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get the chance to read a lot of it. So why don't you just go ahead and kind of explain what that is, and we can just jump into it.
So this is about 12 months of like collecting data. It's some whistleblowers in the military who have gotten together and drafted this letter basically to present to the Armed Forces Committee and members of Congress. Now, I do want to say we have all been beating down Congress members' doors this entire time. We had a call campaign last summer, and we logged over 2 million calls to the Armed Service Committee, and it's been to no avail. Nobody is listening to us. Nobody is helping us. There are a few representatives that have really been in the fight for us, but largely we have been ignored. We have done congressional inquiries. We have said what is happening is illegal, and nobody is helping, which does not surprise me because I believe Pfizer is the number 6 owned stock amongst Congress members. So I'm sure they're all invested in that. So what that document that I sent you is these whistleblowers. They're people who could get into data, um, within the military system, and it's basically saying that what is happening is illegal. And we can fight this from the religious standpoint and the First Amendment all day long, but what people do not understand is the logistics of it is illegal. They are not providing an FDA approved product. And so this document is about 41 pages, and it starts from August, dealing with the Secretary of Defense's order to get an FDA approved um, mandate, and then kind of goes through on how they have been implementing and getting away with providing emergency use products and giving that to military members, but passing it off as if it were FDA approved. So then when they have been called on that, they've been saying it's interchangeable, it's interchangeable. Well, it's not interchangeable legally. And, we actually don't know what the formula is in the emergency use authorized one, because under emergency use, they can adjust the formula at any time. So it's very interesting that the military took a bold stance of that the formulations are the same and they are the same product medically, they're just legally distinct. Because you can't really say that if Pfizer is allowed to tweak emergency use authorization formula. So
And there
yeah,
would be
what do we
no
know?
way for you or for us to know how they've tweaked it, right? Like that's
Um,
not public.
No, I don't believe so. All the ingredients list that I've been able to dig up and we've been able to dig up are mostly redacted. So maybe there's people out there with access, obviously, that I don't have that can look at the ingredients list. But it's just a very bold move for them to say that they are 100% interchangeable in the same formula when you don't know that for sure. But even if they are legally distinct. And Pfizer is protected from lawsuits if injury or death occurs if somebody opted to take an emergency use authorized product.
So I'm going to link to this document in the description of this video, and I might even
Mm-hmm.
put some images up in the video if I find anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you
Yeah.
can recall any of the documents, what are some of the most glaring things in the whistleblower leak? Is there anything in particular that when you were reading it, you were like, "Whoa, that's pretty huge"?
Well, no, because I've known this all the time. Like
Okay.
our networks have been tracking this like a bloodhound. So when they actually put this package together and I read it, it was nothing new to me because we are all tracking this. Um, but people outside the military, even people in the military, everybody got their shot and they just moved forward. And for example, we at church, we're in a community that is largely military, and I will have people come up and ask me what's going on, like where's John in the process, all the things. And I will say something in regard to the legality of this whole thing, apart from religious stuff, just the legality of the product. And their eyes just glaze over. The information gap is so wide. People cannot keep up. And even not that I expect people to keep up with something that's not really affecting their lives, but there's just so much information that it's impossible to keep up unless you're living in it. So what happened was is we collectively have been fighting this the whole time. Like we have been going into the clinic saying, can I see the product? Can I see the vial? Can I see the box? Where's the informed consent? Where's the package? And they can't provide that. They have even told members that they're not allowed to show them the vial. And it's like, how can you have informed consent of a product if you won't even let them see the vial that they're pulling this product out of, that they're going to inject into their arm? That's not informed consent. Um, so people have been documenting what was offered to them, what their clinics had available. The DoD tried to push out a thing that there was BLA compliant. I've never heard the term BLA compliant before. They said there was like 7 lots that were BLA compliant, and they were like still labeled EUA, but they were technically approved. And we had such a lot at our clinic, but it was manufactured on July 2nd, which was 6 weeks before the FDA approved it. Because when you have an FDA approved product, it needs to be made in an FDA approved facility. Obviously, it was made prior to the approval. So that is not legally good, in my opinion. So they tried to like say that they had in their court cases, they tried to say, no, we have enough BLA compliant product. And then when that argument started crumbling, that argument kind of crumbled in May because there was a lawyer who was representing a Navy SEAL at his discharge board. And that Navy SEAL was just getting kicked out. He didn't route a religious accommodation. He just said, this is illegal. You don't have the right product. So you cannot mandate me to take it. The president hasn't signed a waiver, waiving my informed consent. So there's no problem here. So they were going to kick him out, and they did his board of inquiry, which is where it's like kind of like a trial, but it's not. Like they have some peers, and they present the evidence, and the board meets and decides if they want to retain you, which means keep you in, you did nothing wrong, or if they're going to kick you out. Well, they were mind blown to find out that there's no FDA approved product, and that this Navy SEAL was never offered an FDA approved product, and they voted to retain him. His lawyer is incredibly savvy, and he pushed out a press release saying, my client so-and-so, he was retained, this is why. And within a week of his press release, all of a sudden we started having I forget how they pronounce it, Comirnaty. We had Comirnaty approved or Comirnaty labeled vaccines started appearing on bases. And they kept putting it in quotation marks. They kept saying, we now are offering Comirnaty labeled vaccines. And I was like, well, that's weird that they keep putting labeled in quotation marks. So part of that whistleblower report is people have been calling Pfizer and asking about this lot number. Like, where did this product come from? Is it really the FDA approved product? And if it is the FDA approved product, then why do we still have emergency use products in circulation? And they discovered that they were importing Comirnaty from France in a non-FDA approved facility. So the DoD just keeps like, if this is all true, this is all alleged, but we've really been doing our homework on them. They're just taking a hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And each time I think we have hit like peak lawlessness, peak corruption, it's like we transcend into a new level. And so now they have Comirnaty labeled vaccines available with very questionable origin.
Yeah, and I'll include the photos of that little box and the vial. You included that that's included in the document. And it just says Comirnaty COVID-19 vaccine. And I looked it up, and it's somehow related to Pfizer. Is this something that was approved in France that they're now transporting here that isn't approved? Is that kind of the idea?
So Comirnaty has always been available in some of the European countries. That was their version of emergency use. Like in the United States, we had Pfizer BioNTech, but in some of the other countries, their version of Pfizer BioNTech was Comirnaty, and it's under like European emergency use, I believe. Now, don't quote me on that, but the point is if they are importing it from France and trying to say it is FDA approved, that's questionable, because it wasn't manufactured in an FDA approved facility. What's up? So that's kind of what the whistleblower whole report is on. The links they're going to try to tie up loose ends, if you will. And it's alarming And I'm very curious to see what the explanation for all this is going to be and what the outcome is going to be, but it doesn't look good.
Yeah, and there's another document included in the report that is about Senator Ron Johnson's
Hmm.
investigation into the safety and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with that process and what the status is of that investigation?
So in January, Senator Ron Johnson had a COVID roundtable, and he had a lot of military whistleblowers. And what they had done is they had pulled the numbers from the DMED, which is the military medical system, and it showed skyrocketing increases of miscarriages, cancers, myocarditis, pericarditis, strokes, heart attack, like all these things just skyrocketed this last year. And they pulled 5 years worth of data to compare it to, and they had this big roundtable where they kind of blew the whistle on this DMED data. DMED data is better than VAERS because a doctor has to put it in. A doctor has to diagnose you with a condition and then put it in. And DMED data is actually used by a lot of scientific journals and stuff like that because it's pretty good data as far as the military has your weight, your height, your sex, your race, your blood type. They have everything on you. And so for them to be kind of tracking medical conditions, it's a very good system to compare things to. So it's used in scientific journals. Well, as soon as Senator Johnson had that roundtable where DMED data was presented, the DoD tried to say that um, they didn't know it, but there was a glitch in the system for the last 5 years, and it was discovered, and now it's going to like self-correct. So they tried to sweep it under the rug, saying that it was some glitch that went unnoticed for 5+ years, and then just happened to be noticed after that whistleblowing conference. And then just the other day, they pulled the DMAD data again in August, and the rates of myocarditis are up like 225% in the military. And this is in 2001. So they can't even pin it on COVID because it's up from 2020, which is when COVID was very prevalent. And, people weren't being diagnosed with myocarditis then. And I happen to know several military members who have been diagnosed with myocarditis. So it's a very real thing happening um, within the military. And it's sad. And I don't know what the status is with Ron Johnson and his COVID roundtables, if they're still doing them, but I do know he is one of the few, if not one of the only senators who has really gone to bat for us. Thomas Massey's been great. Gates pops in and out when it's popular, in my opinion. And we're actually in his district, and we tried to get his attention for a long time on this, and it wasn't until we showed up to a rally in mass and asked him to give us the time of day. So sometimes he'll pick us up and play with us, and sometimes he won't. But Thomas Massey's been great, and Ron Johnson have really, and Chip Roy, I believe, out of Texas, are some very few representatives who have really been taking us seriously.
Now, are there any you mentioned how there was like a roundtable of whistleblowers. Are there any whistleblowers that are going public, like with their name and everything, that are present at these roundtables, or are these do you know if these are anonymous?
There is a lot. So on the document I send you, everybody put their name on that. There's a few doctors in the military who are whistleblowers, and they put their name on that as well. And it's been very hard to get traction because the mainstream media doesn't want to give anyone time of day if it doesn't meet the agenda. But I will say it has been interesting to watch the narrative shift within the mainstream media over the last year, because a year ago, every article that was published about people who were holding the line was very disparaging and very hostile. And I've slowly seen the shift happening. So that has been encouraging, but it's a little bit too late. Um, Dan Crenshaw is another one that, people, because he's a veteran, so people would really reach out to him and, they were kind of ignored, gaslit, or whatever. And then lo and behold, I saw him on like Fox News a month ago talking about what's happening in the military as if he's going to do something. And it's just frustrating because people were literally calling his office for a year with nothing. And it's like they only pick it up to play with it when it might be advantageous to them, or only when people start winning in the court, or only when a public opinion is shifting and we have midterms coming up. So we all very much feel like we are just a pawn, um, to be used to gain political sway for midterms at this point. And they keep saying, well, after midterms, after a red wave comes, we're going to reinstate you. Nobody wants to be reinstated. We wanted this stopped. We wanted it stopped because if somebody gets kicked out, they've already moved on, they've already found a new job, they've already relocated their family, they're already trying to make the adjustment and get kids in new schools. Why would we want to be reinstated? Why would we want to be kicked out, moved, getting settled, and then come back to this, come back to an abusive relationship? So they're we're going to reinstate you, we're going to do this after midterms or after 24 or whatever. um that's just, it's tone deaf, it's completely tone deaf.
So is I'm currently going through Lieutenant Chad, is it Coppin? I'm
I would have to see it in front of me,
okay,
but
yeah.
it
So
sounds familiar.
it looks like he has written to Senator Ron Johnson, and I think he must be one of the whistleblowers. Um,
Hmm.
okay, so it does look like a lot of people are going out publicly about the side effects, and all of this is within the document that you sent me that I'll link in the description.
Hmm.
Um, the last thing I wanted to ask about this document is regarding the FOIA request.
Hmm.
Um, and that is about community, or however you
Hmm.
pronounce that.
Yeah.
Is someone trying to appeal that FOIA request? Because they got back and they simply said there were no documents regarding that request.
I'm sure they're trying to appeal it.
Okay.
The FOIA request. So we have, even when my husband's, I told you this in the last one, even when his RA package came back denied, they said, you need to, it was, they didn't give him his package. So he's like, I have no idea why it was denied, who denied it, what their reasons were, what the compelling government interest was. And they said, well, you need to file a FOIA request to get your documents. So he filed a FOIA request and it came back completely black. Like they blacked out everything. People have also tried the Privacy Act because that's maybe a better avenue to go for if it's your own personal documents you're seeking. Everything is coming back redacted. Everything is redacted. Nobody has, to my knowledge, nobody has actually gotten to look at their full religious accommodation package and see what the discussion was, what the reasons were, because they're redacting everything. So I don't know what they're hiding. I don't know if maybe they didn't even convey to like meet and talk about it and they're just blacking it out because they have nothing to show, or if it's all blanket denial. Well, we already know it's all blanket denials, but so people are appealing their FOIA requests as well. So I'm sure people are appealing anything that is coming back redacted or not yielding information, but it's, they keep telling you use the complaints within the system, use the, you know, all the system complaints that are available to you, you need to exhaust them. And my husband has exhausted them. He has done IG complaints, he's done DOT IG complaints, he's done 138s against commanders. He has done FOIA requests, privacy requests, congressional inquiries. If there is a system of complaint out there, he has done it. And it has just been beating his head against a brick wall. So it's, they tell you use the system available to you, but they control that system. They control it. So you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, that's a common thing with whistleblowers in the military. You often hear that they should go through the right channels,
Proper channels.
proper
Hmm.
channels. That's exactly how they phrase it. I think Snowden, it was a similar story with him. And then there was man, I don't know why I'm blanking his name right now, but he just got sentenced to a few months in prison. Um, he was the guy who leaked the amount of drone strikes, the amount of
Oh,
civilians killed in drone strikes.
yeah.
So a similar thing with all of these whistleblowers is they they're told to go through the proper channels and then they do, but no one ever does anything about it. So
No.
um, yeah, and I think to kind of wrap up, you had mentioned the injunction. Do you want to talk about like the specifics of that case really quick and where you think it's heading and what the status of it is?
Well, yeah, I'm a little bit salty because my husband was in a case in the Middle District of Florida, which is a great district to be in if you're going to be appealing up to the Supreme Court level, because it's Clarence Thomas or Thomas Clarence's area. So we were like, this is an awesome district. But that judge severed the plaintiffs up into different branches because he said he could not reconcile doing an injunction for everybody because the Army has barely begun to process their religious accommodations. So we knew that the Navy did blanket denials. We knew that the Air Force was doing blanket denials. We were pretty sure the Marines were, but the Navy hasn't, or sorry, the Army hasn't really moved forward. For once, they're the one that's kind of like slow rolling. So that judge said, I cannot reconcile doing a DoD wide injunction because I can't really prove that the Army and the Coast Guard are doing blanket denials or whatever. So he severed the case up into branches. And the Navy SEALs in Texas had an injunction, and then they extended that to the whole Navy. And so they were protected. They're currently protected under a Navy injunction. So there was three different major Air Force cases that were going kind of that were ongoing. There was one in Texas, one in Georgia, and then this one in Ohio. So I really wish it would have been the Georgia or the Texas case that got the injunction, just because I felt a little more comfortable with those circuits. Um, but this case in Ohio, it is on the First Amendment and that they're violating RFRA. And the judge gave them, he said, hey, I'm doing a 14-day TRO. I'm going to do a TRO that you cannot kick people out for the next 14 days. And you need to give me a compelling argument as to why I should not make this an injunction while we're being litigated. And the DoD came back with like the worst argument. Like they are still talking like COVID in the beginning. They are still saying that vaccines slow the spread, that if you get the vaccine, you're not going to get sick. Like they act as if Omicron never happened, where it was everybody got it and it was pretty mild. So they're compelling government interests. They've never said what their compelling government interest is. They've never laid out what is so compelling and what is the reason that the last remaining 5% of the Air Force needs to be vaccinated. And it's just interesting because what is happening is, as you may know, vaccinated people are still catching it, they're still spreading it. My husband has, on multiple occasions, been sitting in his little empty office for weeks on his own because all of his coworkers are out with COVID. And he's tested every week. He's tested every Monday. It is negative, negative, negative because he has natural immunity. And his coworkers are out multiple times with COVID. So it's just asinine that their arguments are still stuck back, you know, in the Delta phase where, it's like they're not catching up to speed. They're very arrogant in thinking that they don't need to put a good case together and bring a good defense. So Judge McFarland out of Ohio did an injunction and they just appealed it yesterday, I believe, and they want him to answer by the 19th because they're telling him that his injunction is preventing them from deploying 10,000 troops. And it's like, no, you're actually the ones who are preventing you from deploying 10,000 troops. But they're trying to blame him and they want him to. I don't know if they appealed it to the appeal court or if they're just appealing it to the judge. I'm not sure what avenue they're taking, but they're appealing it. They're going to keep fighting it. And what they want is they want to be allowed to continue kicking people out, like going through the process and getting them through their TAPS classes, through their final medical appointment, and through their boards. So when you're in over 6 years, you get to have a board where they meet and decide, if you should be kicked out or be retained. And they want to push, and this is like financially a lot of money because they have to spend a lot of money on these judges and fly them all around or these lawyers and fly them all around the country to go to these boards. It takes a lot of time, and they want everybody who's resisting to be all the way up through their board waiting for a kick out date. They want to still be able to do everything up to that point while this is being litigated.
And what's the name of this court case?
I believe it is Doster v. Austin.
Okay.
Hunter Doster v. Austin.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put that in the link of or the description too. And I mean, so you said the 19th, so that's coming up. That's
Yeah, so they want the
days.
judge. I believe that they said they wanted the judge to respond. I don't think they sent it up to the appeal court yet, but don't quote me on that. They might have.
Okay.
I know they were originally appealing because this case started back in March, and the judge had given 18 plaintiffs a preliminary injunction. And I believe they were appealing that. And then in the meantime, he has extended it to all of the Air Force. So
Okay.
right now, my husband is hitting 18 years here in a few weeks, and like we don't know what's going to happen as far as if he's going to get to retirement or if some lawyer said that this will be litigated for quite a long time.
And would he have to stay in the military if that's the case? Like, would he have to, in order to get retirement, would the idea be that he should just stay there until this case is finally litigated and finished?
Probably, which because they're not they're not PCSing. PCS is a permanent change of station, so that's when they move you. Yeah, so I don't know. When the injunction happened, he thought maybe he could get his job back, go back to working. But they haven't really decided what to do with him. And I'm just like, I don't know if he can do 2 years of just wandering around. You know, it's
Yeah.
like when you've gone on 7 deployments and you've TDY'd and you've just gone, and then you're just sitting around doing literally nothing. It's been a long 9 months of just sitting around doing nothing. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well,
It'd
we'll
be nice if he
definitely,
could get college tuition, maybe work on his degree.
yeah. Well, we'll definitely follow the case, and I'm sure we're gonna have to do another update here soon because
Yeah.
that's so it's the 17th is when we're recording it. If he
Hmm.
needs to answer by the 19th, we might have
Yeah.
some new developments soon.
Some update. Yeah.
So yeah,
So I think that's kind of where we are. We're just like waiting, and everybody's deconstructing some of their political beliefs. And it's just kind of been an interesting year. Like I said last year, everybody just wanted to finish their jobs and finish what they started and stay in. And now I would be hard pressed to think of one person I've talked to who says, yes, I want to stay in, or I want my husband to stay in. Everybody's ready to move on. The only reason people are fighting is because it's the right thing to do. And all these people who have held the line, they take their oath to the Constitution very seriously. And, if you get in the Facebook comments, people, say, what religion, doesn't, you can't take a vaccine, blah, blah, blah. I could pull any number of the hundreds of tens of thousands of people who are holding the line and routed a religious accommodation and sit them down with anyone. And if they explained exactly what, you don't have to explain your religious beliefs, but if they sat there and told the person why they're holding the line, I know they would change that person's mind on the situation, because not one single person is just, I don't want to get the shot. I have never heard that as the reason. Like, I don't want to get the shot. Like, these people are willing to die for their country. So it's far deeper than just a shot. Their convictions are very firm. And I'm just really proud of everybody. We have endured awful discrimination, awful treatment, and nothing has happened. Everyone's just stronger for it. Everyone's backbone is a little bit straighter. Um, and they thought they would wear us down. They assume that everybody is like protesting the use of testing on fetal cells or using fetal cells in the vaccine. They assume it's all Catholic people who don't want, that's their objection. And that's actually one of it's one of the objections people have to it, but it's not the only one. And it's definitely what I would say, not even the most prevalent one, or reason. So it's just very tone deaf that leadership thinks that if they offer Novavax to people, that it solves all the problems, because it doesn't. It doesn't solve the problem at all. So that's currently what they're doing in the Air Force. Is the injunction happened, and now they have gotten the FDA to authorize Novavax, and they're trying to push that because they say it doesn't have ties to aborted fetal cells. Um, but I don't think their plan is going to work very well, because I don't know anyone who's doesn't have a very strong backbone after this year.
Yeah, and your point about the First Amendment is very important there, and freedom of religion. I think really what it gets at is freedom of conscience, and how
Mhm.
um, even if you couldn't point to somewhere in some religion, uh, the First Amendment really is expressing something about not wanting to violate people's conscience. And I mean, I could point to places in the Bible and in Christianity where it says not to violate your conscience. So that's just
Mhm.
one example. But yeah, just to wrap up, if you have any more thoughts, please finish with whatever you want to say, and then wherever people can find you, you can also provide your information so people can get in contact
Well,
with
I'm still a little incognito because
you.
I don't, I've got kids. um, so I still recommend people follow Military Freedom Keepers on Instagram. They're really good about pushing information out. They are really looking for Army plaintiffs in the Middle District of Florida right now, to get the Army case up and going. They've got the Coast Guard case up and going, so the Army is the last. And we really need plaintiffs who are either from or registered to vote or stationed in Middle District counties in Florida, because they have a good judge, it's a good district, and they're going to get a case going. And that case is with Liberty Counsel, which the cases that need donations, Liberty Counsel, First Liberty Institute, those are nonprofit religious organizations whose sole purpose is to defend religious liberty. So they are nonprofits. They would welcome donations. They have active cases. First Liberty Institute, Liberty Counsel. Follow them also on social media platforms, because they are often posting about the military fight that's happening. There's another case going on. It is with Dale Saran. He is the man who litigated the anthrax case, and he's the man who won that. And he has a giant case going on right now that is arguing the legality of the mandate in itself. And I know he would welcome donations as well, because I think he's got like 1,000 plaintiffs on this case. And his case entails people who got the shot, who felt duped, who felt like they were tricked and they thought it was FDA approved and it wasn't. He has people who took one shot and were injured and weren't allowed a medical exemption. And then he has, a bunch of people who were just fighting the legality of it. So Dale Saran, and I will send you, all these people's information. And I just want to say how proud I am of everybody. I'm so proud of my husband. And it's like while people are kind of deconstructing a lot of their belief systems over the last year, and what has happened, why did we get into this position, why are we where we are, I'm just still so proud of my husband, and I'm proud of everything he's done in the military. He has always loved what he did, and his job was primarily helping make personal recovery plans. So if somebody was shot down or somebody was injured, that they were trained on how to get themselves safely home. And so I'm just proud of what he's done. And even though I'm not proud of how it's going to end, if he's kicked out or whatever, I'm not very proud of that. But that's not on him. That was he did exactly what he swore he would do, and that was defend the Constitution. So I'm just so proud of him. It's not been easy. It's not easy to think that 18 years of your life is kind of going to just be washed down the drain by people getting away with illegal acts. But I'm just really proud of everybody who has just stood up and said, nope, we're not taking part in this. I'm not gonna do the easy thing, which is just, roll over or retire quietly, or, if you could, because whatever happens here is going to be left to our children. And if we don't fight, it's just going to be handed down to them, and it'll be worse and messier. So the laws are there, and you just need to hold people to them, and you have to be willing to hold people to them.
Well, thank you so much, Danny, again for an amazing podcast, and just for all the work you do, the research. It's very easy to interview you because you provide so many notes ahead of time, and it's just amazing how much work you put into this and time. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, it is your life, so you kind of have to be aware of all of this. So um, please keep doing what you're doing, and I just thank you for holding the line and encouraging other people too. And I just wish you all the best luck, and I'll be praying for you, and I hope others do too.
Thank
And
you.
for anyone who's listening, please boost this episode as well as the previous episode, and share this to whoever will be interested, whoever can donate, whoever can get a voice out there. Definitely get this word spread. I think anywhere on the political spectrum, you should be concerned about
Yeah.
this issue.
If we can get that whistleblower report shared to the Armed Service Committee, like I said, I don't know how much they can do at this point because we've called them so much. But the more, as midterms approach, like the more representatives that will really sit down and take a look at this and really read it, because we've been squawking this from the rooftops and nobody's really kind of wanted to touch it. And I think it's really a good summary of what we've been doing for the last 12 months.
Yeah, and I think people really underestimate the amount of pressure simply just calling your representative, calling their office does. If you get a few people just to do that regularly, they start
Hmm.
to notice. So
Hmm.
I would encourage everyone to do that. Share this on social media and
Yeah.
reach out to
Yeah.
all of
And
these organizations.
I would love to see civilians calling because we are tired. We are so tired. Um, all of the military, all the spouses, all the people holding the line, like we are exhausted. And when we have been calling and knocking on the door and beating on the door and nothing is happening, we're just running out of steam. And honestly, a lot of us have just given up in our representatives. I don't even remember the last time I tried calling Senator Daines, because the door has just been closed. And so it's just too exhausting for me when I'm dealing with this all day long. My husband's dealing with this all day long. The last thing we want to do is call somebody who's going to blow us off.
Yes.
So it'd just be really great if other people could kind of pick up the torch and carry it for us for a little bit because we are tired.
Yeah, Danes is very difficult to get in touch with. His voicemail is always off. It doesn't take any messages. But I think you should be able to get in touch with him over email. But definitely call Rosendale and Tester, because Tester brands himself as being for the veterans, being for people serving in the military, and this is an issue that he should pick up then. And Rosendale has been pretty good on a lot of
Yeah,
things. So
Rosendale has, I've seen him co-sign and co-sponsor a lot of good bills. But we did one congressional inquiry with him, and it was just canned responses. And then the second one, we reached out to do another one, and they basically said, sorry, we can't help you at that point. So I just don't know. It's very hard to navigate within the system because it's so broken at this point, and everybody has invested interest. And it's very hard to get traction. It's incredibly hard to get traction.
yeah. Well, so if you are listening to this podcast, please do everything we just said. Donate to any of those organizations. I'll link to all of that in the description. And then call your representative and share this episode around. I really appreciate you, Danny, for coming on
Thank you.
again.
Thank you for
Be-
having me.
Yeah, and being brave enough to speak out and just consistently research and stay on top of this. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.